Thank you guys for being here. I mean, I feel like we had the best coffee in house, so I hope everyone has had it as well. Um, so I think, as our MC mentioned, we're going to be discussing today about how we can potentially scale EdTech across Ethiopia, as well as yesterday. Everyone has seen on the potential and innovation of Ethiopia when it comes to EdTech. But to be honest, not just EdTech, most entrepreneurs, innovators struggle to scale. Now, the real challenge is how can we scale? And when we say scale, we mean to say alignment between capital, institutions, as well as policy and what actually happens on the ground. So, as our mentioned, I have with me Mrs. Sophia, Global CEO of Fit for Change, who has worked globally with social entrepreneurs, supporting them in scaling solutions. And we have with us Hassan Hussein, CEO and Director General of EDI, who also brings with us a unique blend of academia, policy, and also development experiences both in Ethiopia and Africa. And last but not least, Amaha Bakala, who's an angel investor as well as a member of the Addis Ababa network, angel networks, with deep experience in strategy, investment, and governance from Deloitte and EY. And I'm gonna straight jump to the question. Ladies first. So Sophia, you have worked across multiple markets and regions. What actually determines whether an EdTech solution moves beyond pilot into real life scale?
Hi everyone, it's really nice to be here again today. And can I just say that from yesterday and from talking with every one of you, and especially all of the fellows, I'm so impressed by your innovations and how far you've come. So I just want to express also my gratitude to you all for what you're doing, not only as individual entrepreneurs, but what you're doing for your own country, for Ethiopia. So just want to start with that. But yes, we've been working with scaling entrepreneurs across many different markets. We have worked for the past 15 years with over 3,000 social entrepreneurs across many markets in Africa, across Europe, and now in Ukraine as well. And if I may, I'd like to maybe revert back a little bit, because I think the discussion of scale is really important, but I think we also need to talk about the impact. What is it that we are wanting to scale? What is it? Let's go back to the core. And for me, the core has a lot to do with the entrepreneurial journey as well, and the grit that is needed in the entrepreneur to follow through this journey. So what we've seen across our markets is that all of our entrepreneurs actually embody these elements, but maybe need coaching and support and capacity in a few of these elements across the way. And maybe you can be strong in one area but need support in another. And I think the first is around focus and product and mindset. So these are three ingredients which are extremely important to actually prepare you for this scaling journey. You really need to have a strong focus. Who are you focusing on as a start, that you can prove that your innovation is actually working? Is it the teachers? Is it deaf students? Is it female learners? Who is it that you're targeting? And you want to really create the best possible solution for that group. Your main goal before thinking of anything else should be that this must be something that the user really wants and improves their lives. That one life that can then scale to many different lives. And I think the inspirational opening we had now really talked about that as well. Understanding that local context, understanding that little girl or that little boy who has their own challenges and their journeys. So I think that really must be like the first element, that gritty kind of element. What we've also seen is combined with that is what you have to have in the beginning is a mindset that you actually want to scale, because this will be a really long journey. And it's fine if you're an entrepreneur to have the idea that you just want to grow your product. That's a great grow your service. That's also a great thing to have. I don't think that that's a bad thing per se. But if we're really going to change and transform the educational outcomes, then you as an entrepreneur need to have this element of like mindset scale, that I want this to go across all regions in Ethiopia. I want maybe this to go to Kenya, to Rwanda, to wherever, to have that really, really thing. Then it's the element of also proving your impact. And at Reach for Change, we coach a lot around impact and impact measurement. How do you know your solution has an effect, and how can you prove that? And that's about gathering data and continuously talking to your users. And I think this element is something that the entrepreneurs and you entering into the cohort, and you may be in the cohort now, sometimes are a little bit resistant. We want to run, we want to quickly do things. Why are we gathering all this data? But I think it's extremely important because it brings you to the next things. Once you've proven your impact and proven your solution, and it's the best, to be able to scale, we can't scale without partnership, particularly not in the educational sector. You have to fit into the strategies that we have in Ethiopia, the educational reforms, the 2030 initiatives on digitalization. We have to fit into these plans. And to be able to do that, we have to understand these plans. And that means we have to partner. And we have to partner with these actors. Even if you have your customer group, might be schools or private schools at the moment, it might be parents, it might be NGOs at the moment. If we're really going to have outcomes at scale, then we have to develop these partnerships. And that can take a really long time. And it also requires you to listen and to insert yourself into these kinds of programs. And finally, once you're partnering, in a region, for example, or you have these, you have to be willing to adopt and to adjust your product. There are infrastructure challenges. We talked about that yesterday. There are cultural instances. There are things that schools and maybe learners that you haven't reached before. You have to be able to pivot and adjust. And we've seen this with great examples. I can bring that up later as well, with other African contexts, how they've done. But I think that that's extremely important. I just wanted to bring those elements before we talk about the scale.
So maybe Amma, my question is for you next. Sophia has mentioned alignment with national and global targets, mindset, already MVP that can be scaled. As an investor, are these factors that align with what investors are looking for, or are founders, kind of overestimating how ready they really are when it comes to scaling?
Where we're positioned as a country in Ethiopia, 130 million people, we are 1/10 of the continent's population. So if you can make it work here, it should be very easy for us to export it to any other country on the continent. That's the mindset I have. It's unfortunate we don't really have a lot of startups that have gone out of Ethiopia in the past, but I really hope, especially with the new incentives the government is putting forward in terms of allowing startups to expand onto the continent, we really have a big opportunity. And if I look at EdTech, today, we're producing, as 130 million people, we're producing about 4 million kids every year. Those kids need to go to school. We don't really have, the setup that is allowing our kids to go through the standard education process and creating, the world-class students that we want. So EdTech has a big potential to play. If you look at the big opportunity from the top. The question then is, do we have the right solution or the right startup that has the right mindset to think around, how do I scale? How do I own this market? I want to invest in a company that is going to become the next top 2-3 players. Otherwise, it really is not worth it for us to invest our time, energy, and money. So the problem statement needs to be very clear. It needs to show me the scale. It needs to show me the size, the problem that we're trying to solve. It needs to show the team composition. It needs to tell me that we've got the right team structure to deliver on the promise or on the problem that we're trying to solve. And then what is the funding and the process to take us there? And I guess this is where, the donor funding, angel investors, all the right stakeholders are clearly mapped out. And then, the go-to-market strategy then starts getting executed. The opportunities is there. And I think I've probably attended, I don't know, probably 5, 6 EdTech startups in the past. I've not seen this. So we've not invested as, you know, as angel investors in the country. Very few, I think, investable opportunities have come to us because, you know, if you're going to make a difference, if you're going to have an impact, you know, the team, the problem that we're trying to solve needs to show us that, you know, we've got a grand vision, and not only in Ethiopia, because if you solve the problem in Ethiopia, I tell you, you'll solve a significant portion of the problems across the continent. This is not an Ethiopia issue, it's a continent issue. And we have the perfect test bed in Ethiopia to test, to try it out, to scale it locally, and then to expand it on the continent.
So what are your non-negotiables before you invest in an EdTech company? Non-negotiables.
The 3 non-negotiables are: what am I trying to solve? Okay, what is the problem? What's the size of the problem that we're trying to solve? Do we have the right team composition? If not, I need to fix that before I put my money in. And then third, do we have the right funding structure around it? Okay, so sometimes, you know, startups will come to me with a problem, and this is a very big problem in this country. They will come to me with a problem and say, this is the big opportunity we have. We want to solve this. I need $500,000 birr because I want to build this, but we're only solving 5 or 10% of that problem. And I say, okay, what does that mean? After 5 or 10% of that problem is solved, where do we go from here? We're going to go back to looking for funding, and then it becomes a complicated exercise. I want somebody that really has thought about it and is willing to go the mile, but has really got the mindset to scale.
So you have heard what Ato Amma said, and Sophie has mentioned as well, the factors and their non-negotiables. Do you think are Ethiopian EdTech entrepreneurs meeting these expectations? Or where's the gap for them to meet these expectations?
Very good. Thank you very much. Let me begin with a commentary on the state of education in Ethiopia today. I think it would not be an exaggeration to state that our education is in disrepair. Education at all levels. I once remember talking to an elder on my way from Mojo to Bishoftu, and I was asking him, "Are you sending your children to school?" And he said, "Yeah, they will go and they come." And I asked him, "What do you mean?" He said, "Their teachers are no better." Our education system needs to do a thorough self-reflection, including addressing the comments that I try to enumerate in my opening speech. That's the first thing. The second thing is, yes, there are so many innovators, entrepreneurs who are trying to address the problems that are being that I try to mention, and they have a lot of talent. Their passion is there. As far as the gaps is concerned, I can cite at least 4 or 5 of them. The first is buying from institutions, an issue of being taken seriously, the issue of our institutions being a little bit unresponsive to young people with ideas, with talent. Perhaps the second one is issue of connectivity and affordability. Yes, it is improving, but we still have a long way to go. As far as the youth is concerned, we still have a lot of work to do as far in inculcating entrepreneurial competencies. Funding is still scarce. and it's largely donor-driven. And for the most part, we are looking at one market, which is Addis Ababa, and I think these are some of the gaps that I see.
Do you think that these EdTech companies, are there really pipelines for Amaha to invest in, is the question? Are there enough EdTech pipelines for Amaha to invest in?
I think there are quite a few. Yes, there are quite a few.
I should exchange numbers.
Yeah. But I think funding is a major problem, especially seed money. Before they are able to scale and become a dominant player in the market, we need a lot of factors who are there to support them. Setting themselves up, having the requisite skills, having the right mentors and coach. I think that's where there is I think that's a major gap.
Are EdTech solutions or entrepreneurs, innovators here addressing underserved groups like women, rural dwellers, refugees, that kind of thing?
I think we have a long way in doing so. I think most of the EdTech companies I'm seeing are largely concentrated in Addis Ababa. Yeah. I think we have a lot of work to do as far as inclusion is concerned.
From your experience, how do you design or support entrepreneurs to design, for inclusion without compromising scalability?
Yeah, well, a few reflections. First of all, I love this quick, pitch, investor pitch. I hope you were all taking notes, so that you know how to come and pitch in the break. Also, we can practice. But I definitely see the gaps and challenges that you're addressing. Obviously, and we see that in the cohorts as well. Firstly, just a thought on scale before I get on to the inclusion element. But when it comes to scale, there are different pathways of scaling as well, right? And I think that that's important in the entrepreneurial journey as well. That's something that we try to support with, but it's good to keep in mind. We have also, there is potential in Addis with growing middle class and diaspora and things in terms of complementary educational initiatives, and there are great pathways to scale through those customer segments as well. But if we're going to attack the problem, the big massive problem that we see here on a systemic level, then obviously the pathway of scale will have to be through these, through government, through partnerships, and through, as you were talking about, largely donor driven. So we have to understand these different stakeholders and the different incentives in those stakeholders. And I do see in the cohort that we have supported, but also in a lot of the entrepreneurs that are coming and starting in Addis, the desire to go into other areas and to other regions and to actually make their products and services as inclusive and as representative as possible. So I see a lot of drive and ambition to actually make the educational system better. And I think that is something that we shouldn't underestimate, the passion of these, like the young entrepreneurs that really have that goal. And so there is a lot of exciting things happening that I think that we can support. One thing that we haven't talked about so much, or which I was trying to mention also, is on the scaling journey, again, this adapting to context. And we know the partnerships are difficult to get, but if you have good pilots, we knock pilots a lot, but they give us evidence, right? And that helps us scale, and that helps us achieve more partnerships on local levels as well. And if we have that, that's where we see, okay, needs to be adapted in this local context, also to this specific target group. We have a great example of an entrepreneur that we started supporting in Tanzania almost, I think, 10 or 11 years ago. She's done an amazing journey, and she pivoted completely her her model. I would recommend you check her out for inspiration. Faraja is her name, and her service is called M-Shule. But I mean, in her scaling journey, she had to change her product to be SMS based and learning for how do you adapt this to low literacy levels, which was the problem obviously in Tanzania also, where there was very almost 50% of teacher absenteeism and similar challenges. So she completely adapted her model to be able to fit, because she also had the idea that she really wanted to be driven by her purpose and her passion. And I think that that's also, we know the challenges, but let's not underestimate those things. We know it's difficult to develop these partnerships, but with these ingredients, I think you can. And a final thing I think would be interesting to explore is also bundling of services. How can we work together as a cohort and complement each other when it comes to the different regions we support or the different target groups we support?
Maybe just right there, you earlier kind of mentioned the benefits of partnerships and how it can play a very big role, right? So what partnerships have actually helped solutions scale? So you've told us now what the entrepreneurs need to do. They need to be locally contextualized. They need to be adaptable. They can consider service bundling. But what would work when it comes to partnerships for them to scale? That's for you.
Well, I mean, I think, as I said, also evidence, as we're talking about, the vision, the goal that you have, which has to be, wider than just, this kind of target group. The team, that element is also extremely important. But then, of course, you're going to need door openers and facilitators. And that is also where events like this and organizations such as Reach for Change come in. This is an opportunity for us to be able to open doors so that you can understand what's on the government agenda, what's on the investors' agenda, what benefits can you get from this new startup legislation, for example? How can we leverage that? How can we use that? But also this learning between the cohort, I think, is super important. An entrepreneurial journey is extremely lonely. To have other role models around you that you can work with and that you can ask, because obviously you knock on a door and you ask for a partnership, you're not going to get it right away, right? It's going to take great and long-term commitment and timing as well.
I mentioned some of these partnerships. From an investor lens, do you think that these partnerships reduce risk, or do they sometimes make ventures more dependent and less investable? So if they're donor dependent all the time, what does that mean for you as an investor?
Using an example of one of the startups I invested in. So if you know about the ride-hailing business in Ethiopia, I think 10 years back, we really had no ride-hailing in Ethiopia. So we had the blue taxis. I used to travel a lot across the continent with work, and I used to get ripped off by the blue taxis, and I got pissed off. One day I said, okay, this is a sector I'm going to invest in. It's funny, I was talking to some of my colleagues in Kenya, and one person said, oh, I received a deck for a possible investable startup in Ethiopia. It was right. So I quickly flew back. I had a conversation over the weekend. I think it was there in the making. There was really no trips done at the time. We talked about the numbers, the scalability. Today, the ride-hailing business in Ethiopia is probably around 9 billion birr business per year. So it just shows you what, having a big vision, understanding the size of the market, and going aggressively, not only brings your startup to where it needs to be, but it also encourages others to come in and completely transform that business, that sector. And when I look at the ride-hailing business versus education, there's really no comparison. Education is a much bigger business, but it needs that vision. Also needs to collaborate with, the DFIs, the donor agencies. I don't think the ride-hailing business had any money coming into it from donor business until probably 18 months ago. Sadly, I had given up by then and I exited from my investment, which is sad, but I think that collaboration, especially in Ethiopia, where funding is so difficult, getting a bank loan is like being blessed and you're guaranteed to go to heaven in Ethiopia. It's even probably worse than that. It's very difficult to get a bank loan. So the only potential for investment is few folks like us and the donor agencies. So if you look at the number of startups that are actually getting incubated in Ethiopia versus countries like Kenya or any of the countries on the region, we are nowhere there. Even though we constitute 10% of the African population, we don't produce anything. We literally don't produce anything. It's that bad. So the collaboration is the only way we're going to create successful startups. No doubt. We get, at one point, we used to get pitched every Monday for like 6 months at 7 p.m., me and my colleagues on Google, we used to hear pitch. But it was difficult. We weren't getting the quality, the funding structure, the models they come with. It just, the environment is not there yet. So, and I think one of the fundamental reasons is the funding. The funding is very difficult. So, you either have startups that are purely focused to get money from the donor community that are solving specific problems. So if there's a donor that is focused on women education, they will create a program specifically for that, but it doesn't have the scale and the growth potential. So when they come to us, they're not thinking the way we think. As angel investors, we think about, how am I going to make money? How am I going to generate money? How am I going to get out after a few years? Because, the whole reason we're there is to help them, mentor, coach, but also share with them our experiences, but also make sure we create successful, large enterprises. I'm not interested in a company that wants to be 100 million birr after 10 years. It's pointless. We're not solving that problem. We're not solving the problem. If you come to me with an education, an EdTech solution, and you show me a scale that's going to get to 100 million, but especially when we're solving a problem for 130 million people, okay? Understand, that's the scale of the problem we're trying to solve. And that's just Ethiopia. Imagine when you think about Africa. I mean, our neighbors, if you think about North, Djibouti, South Sudan, they're even in a worse place than us. Somalia, they're even in a worse place than us. So to actually go out, it's much easier to test the bet, to expand into the rest of the continent. If you've solved the problem, believe me, in Ethiopia, you've solved the problem across the continent. Because all the problems exist in Ethiopia. Infrastructure, skill set, funding, all the problems exist here. It's much easier to do a startup anywhere else on the continent. So I think it's bringing all these key stakeholders together to solve a problem is a guarantee to make sure that startup will succeed.
How do we create this coordinated ecosystem? What role did I play?
Well, first of all, let me thank Amaha because Ride and Sam Ride have made our life in Addis very comfortable. But we need to remember the challenge and the hurdles that Sam Ride had to go through on account of being a woman and on account of being a young person, not being taken seriously by institutions. Among I think the two solutions that have made at least my life easier in Addis are, some routes right and perhaps Telever. So thank you for doing that. We are sort of a trailblazer in this area. I'm in EDA. We have a three-dimensional intervention approach. We work with individuals, uh, be it in capacity building, access to finance, linking entrepreneurs with market, working on the ecosystem, making sure that different players in the ecosystem can collaborate. Um, we 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 take pride in being part of the startup proclamation. I think it is a step forward. I think compared to other proclamations and laws across Africa, I think ours is a little bit too timid for my taste, but it is still a step forward. We also recently succeeded in passing a national entrepreneurship policy, and an enabling law is being drafted as I speak. I hope combined with the startup proclamation, it will help open up the ecosystem. We also provide a comprehensive suite of support packages, like I mentioned, access to finance, capacity building, market linkage, and ecosystem support. We also play an enabler role, more like a catalyst. We help other organizations like universities, Tibet colleges, and private enterprises to basically do what we do and do more things. Uh, we are trying to make the entrepreneurship support packages as accessible to as accessible as possible everywhere. Our support programs are culturally and linguistically intelligent, and by so doing, we want to uh, make sure that this effort is not simply an effort limited to Addis Ababa and the surrounding regions, but something that's accessible throughout the country. We have an extensive relationship with universities and Tibet colleges, helping them um, to have programs where young people with ideas can be supported. We're working with universities um, on their path towards gaining autonomy. We have helped Tibet colleges to set up incubation centers to avail their premises for startups, uh, to be to have some financial flexibility by generating their own income. So we are doing a lot of work in this area. But one thing that I would like to emphasize, something that was my colleagues mentioned here, is the issue of ecosystem collaboration. I think, especially in the public sector, collaboration is still new. We tend to work in silos. So I think that's one area where we need to work very hard, because the problem is too big for us to be able to solve them alone.
Um, we have 10 minutes. I'm going to give each of you guys 1 minute before I shift this to the audience for Q&A. Amaha, what do you think is the biggest misconception founders have about scaling EdTech? One misconception.
And I don't think this is purely for EdTech. I think for a lot of startups, um, building a system, switching it on, and expecting customers to walk in onto your platform doesn't really work. I'll tell you that. It doesn't really work. I think when I invested on Ride, it was a significant money. Before then, there was 0 trips. To actually get it to 40,000 trips, All the money, 80% of the money went on marketing, branding, making noise. Okay? 20% went towards the solution. So a lot of, and a lot of startups don't really understand that. So they'll come and say, okay, I need the money to build the system, then we switch it on, and then, hallelujah, we start making money. It doesn't work. It's the wrong conception. You really need to be in front of your potential customers, and that takes money. So I'll tell you, when we started, right, we used to pay drivers up to 50 to go and pick up a customer, not the other way around. Okay, my money was going out paying drivers, the same taxi drivers that I used to hit, and I wanted to transform. We had to pay them to go and pick up customers, and then they will also collect from customers. The point there was they're getting less from the customers. So as the volume of transaction picked up, then we became the ones that could decide what rates, and no commission, no extra fees from us anymore. Now you go and pick up for free. They started picking up. When the numbers reached a certain number, then we said, okay, now we charge you commission. So the whole business model really needs proper thinking. And I think that's where the biggest challenge in every startup is.
Sophia, you have heard Amaha give us so many things that they want if they want to invest in a startup. Do you agree? Are they right, or are they rigid to have all these expectations from an early stage startup?
No, I love the inspiration. I think that definitely those are the kind of things you should be thinking about. I think we should also recognize that the educational sector is really different to the logistics or fintech, or whereas we see some of the growing startups also coming in Ethiopia. I think it's important to recognize we see education as a public good. It should be provided by the government, and it should be provided with high quality. We see the entrepreneurs who are coming into this space, they are driven by dual agenda. They don't only want to grow big businesses, but they really want to change the lives of children and young girls and young learners and young boys. And I think that that ambition, we call it social entrepreneurship because it's really working to address a societal issue. It will be complex, it will be difficult, and maybe scale will look different. Maybe scale is in the future you want government adoption and you want to really see the systems around you change. And to do that, we need to work together and collaborate and understand these things. But I think you'll get there much further if you use this mentality of mindset, customer, product, and how you do it really, really, really good. But yeah.
Dr. Hassan, the last question to you. Ingrid, we have heard Amaha tell us what he wants if he's going to invest in an EdTech company. And then we have heard Sophia tell us that EdTech is a public good. It's a bit more complex than the typical tech-enabled entrepreneurs. What kind of role would EDI play in bridging this gap or understanding between the startups versus the investors?
I think what donors, angel investors, venture capitalists, and the foundations from around the world need to understand is we are just making baby steps. Some of the ideas are really not original at this point. There are adaptations from YouTube, Google, and now ChatGPT. And this there is a good reason for why this is the case. As a culture, including in our education, we tend to discourage people to go off the beaten path, to be really creative, to think what is unthinkable, to dream big. So we are really at the baby steps, and what we need is a lot of players that can support creative people with seed money, not seed money to uh, to get by, but seed money enough to for them to be able to stand on their feet, to be able to test the market and skill. I think as far as having that is concerned, we have a very long way to go because how do I know this? Because what I'm seeing is you have a person working on an idea, and there are many players in the ecosystem. I see them hopping from one donor to another, from one uh, support organization to another. The reason is because the support is simply not enough.
Thank you, guys. So I'm gonna open the floor for questions from the guests.
Thank you so much for your time, and great morning for you all. Regarding to the governance and co-optation challenge, I have something to hear from you. Anyone can reply for me. How do we structure governance, data sharing, align intensive for sustainable growth, like when we are simultaneously partners, customers, and collaborators. Like it's a challenge to share structure of governance and data sharing. So I want to hear something from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will take whoever wants to respond, but let's get the questions first. Another one?
Salam, my name is Tainat. My question is for Sophia. I'm just thinking because How was talking about how he invested in a ride, and it's specifically for a commercial purpose. But as you said, EdTech is a very different venture, and mainly it's a public good. So also scaling looks different, right? At the end of the day, it's the parents that are going to be your customers, and that's a very limited resource, I think, to scale. So where do you think, what is the preferred? Okay, I'll just reframe it. Should EdTech startups raise money from VCs?
Last one.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, yeah, I'm from Bridge for Change, Zacharias. I would like to thank for the panelists for the very good reflection. So before I raise two of my questions, which interest me about scaling and the different ways of scaling journey, I would like also to reflect about the inclusion questions and taking the experience of our two cohorts that we accelerate thus far. So inclusion is at the center, for EdTech, initially was the foundation, Mastercard Foundation, underpinning of this program, to complement the conventional learning and education, it should be affordable, accessible, and personalized. So unless it meets these tests, EdTech can't be that much complementary or supplementary to the conventional education. So within that thinking, we have been working to address inclusivity, and that starts from our search and selection. And currently, we have companies founded by regional fellows. So we have 5 companies from Tigray, Amhara, Somali, as well as in the new cohort now from Hawassa, Sidama. So that's one thing. And the other thing we consider within our parameters or indicators of inclusion is the fact that whether these solutions reach refugees, as well as female young learners, as well as persons with disabilities. So for that, we have an inclusion advisor that support the fellows so that they make their solutions more adaptive and designed with a universal thinking. And our results thus far shows that 62% of the learners are female learners. As well, we have 41 founders who are 41% of the companies out of the 24 are founded by female founders. And in the new cohort that we are going to kick off today, this afternoon, 50% or 6 of the female founders are female. With that showing the efforts going on, but not enough, enriching learners in different end of the country. With this background, I would like to pose my questions. So we see that from experience, the companies are juggling between, in their scaling journeys, are juggling between, business, scaling their business in different ways, and also, dragged into, fund seeking. So as we know, education is not that much, with a return in business, and they will be challenged after some time, to scale within the business spectrum. So how do you advise? I heard that they have to, segment their users, and also it's okay to go for funding. So, but we see that it confuses them in between. They start scaling, but it's not that much, incrementally or exponentially increasing. So it ties their thinking of business, because the return is limited. So how do you advise them? One of the question for the investors or the scaling journey. The other one is through the application process. We have seen that there are lots of companies just at early growth stage or idea stage. They have very good ideas, but they don't meet our tests of growth stage company. So they don't have like traction, they don't have business license, audit report, and so on. So they are left out categorically because of our selection criteria. So when and how do we engage them is a challenge, because we have also a test in the project, requirements. So how do you advise this large group of, companies in the pipeline?
So I think one of the questions is for Ammaha, and then Sophia and Dr. Hussein as well. You can start from the last.
So I know Kadam Sala right, Saura. I think EdTech is different. Yemil feedback I'm hearing a lot from all of you. I think startups are startups, and I think what makes technology very different from other type of businesses is your competitor as an EdTech is not the guy sitting next to you on the table. It's the guy who's operating across the continent. Okay? Again, I'll use the right example. When we started Right, we had local competitors. But if I look at the two other competitors that are there now, Yango is a foreign company. Ferris operates in a number of other countries. So scale, if you're going to survive and stay, you need scale. Whether it's government funded, whether it's private funded, you need scale. You need numbers. The bigger the scale, the lower the pricing you can charge. Okay? I talked about 4 million kids are born every year in Ethiopia. If you charge $1,000 for one kid, that's $4 billion. If you get just 1 year's, if you wait for 4 years for them to get to grade 4, and then you find them, you've got an education material every year, you're collecting $4 billion every year for that kid to get to grade 12. Now, what kind of content, what kind of solution, what kind of product is the way you need to think? Because the biggest challenge all tech companies have today is the market is open. Okay? Especially with the new Startup Act, foreigners can literally walk across from Kenya, they can come across, set up shop, and they're your competitors. It's not where funding is much, much easier. So you really need to think like a business. I think that's key.
ዳታ ሼሪንግ እና ገቨርነንስ ላይ ጥያቄ ተጠይቋል። ወደ ሽምግልናም እየሄድኩ ስለሆነ በደንብ የሰማሁ አልመሰለኝም እና ምናልባት በግል ለመመለስ ሞክራለሁ ከተቻለ። All right. Let me say a couple of things. The first thing that I would like to say is to express my great appreciation for this organization, Reach for Change, for their kind financial support, for your mentorship, for being able to make a lot of young people to be able to dream, to have a shot at realizing their dreams. I would really appreciate if the audience would join me in expressing my appreciation for the organization that was. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to speak to another gap that is not often expressed. We are talking about young people here, young people with ideas, and there are many of them. And one of the challenges that I often see is being able to manage the startups. They may have the ideas, they may have the technical knowledge, but being able to run that as a company, especially a company in its growth scale stage, is not something that we learn from our parents. I'm not sure if our business schools are able to equip them with, with the record skills. I see a lot of gaps. Being able to manage the few, the cash that they have, being able to take care of the few customers that are willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think that's one area that we need to work on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just give some very final reflections because I know we're out of time, very, very much. But first of all, I just want to acknowledge that by definition, the business model of a social entrepreneur is flawed. It's completely huge challenge because, as Zacharias was pointing out, I mean, the objective that we have is to make these solutions affordable and accessible and inclusive. And that means that the person who is benefiting from them cannot pay for them by definition. So I think the advice I could give now is be the best you can be in the segment that you have. Whether it be starting with the private schools, whether it be starting with NGO contracts, whether it be starting with subscriptions where you can pay as you go. Whatever model, be the best that you are there. Then when it comes to the scaling issue, Zacharias also pointed to that incremental scale or exponential scale. I just want to say that the educational system takes a very long time to change. This is not unique to Ethiopia. This is how we see it in Europe as well, and in other places. We have collective action initiatives in India that have been working for 25 years to change things. So you need the grit. And I would say to the question of what type of capital and what to look, another way of looking at it is also not from who, but what type of capital can you get in? There's a lot of, if you start with grants, that's a good foundation, or paying customers. But if you want to then go on to the next level, what we see is a lot of DFIs and a lot of development institutions de-risking private investments that are trying to increase. There's a value in looking at kind of soft loans and graduating to other types of loans, even though we know commercial loans are very difficult to get. So that's something I would also advise, to look at what type of capital can you get in. And to do that, you need to have this kind of business mindset, I would say. Thank you.
We're out of time. Thank you guys for your knowledge, your skills, your expertise. And I think we have learned something. Know your market and know who you're asking money from. And I'm summing it up. Thank you. Have a good day.